Welcome, welcome. I see our attendees streaming into the room. Welcome. We're so excited that you're able to join us today for this very interesting session. I'm thrilled to have the guest that we have with us today to be talking about AI in the admissions review process. And this is really going to be a conversation, a presentation and conversation with Juan Espinoza from Virginia Tech. My name is Emily Pacheco. I am one of the co-founders of the AI in college admission community. We are over 3,000 members strong, growing each day. That's how many of you heard about this event. And we are, along with EdHub.ai, we are partnering and hosting this webinar today. So I'm going to there is a Q&A. Please ask questions. Please don't wait to the end. There's a lot of questions that flow in right at the end. Feel free to ask questions anytime. We'll get to as many of those as we can. We are recording this session. So if you think of somebody who would like to watch this, listen to this, you will be able to share that with them. And if you want to watch it again, it will be up on our website shortly afterwards. So we will get started. Juan, I want to have you introduce yourself here and tell us a little, who you are.
Sure. Juan Espinoza. I serve as Vice Provost for Enrollment Management here at Virginia Tech. I've been at Virginia Tech for quite a bit. I'm approaching my 20th year right now. This is my alma mater, so I did do my undergraduate degrees here. Got kind of sucked into the Blacksburg community. It's a wonderful place if you've never visited. We're surrounded by the Blue Ridge Mountains. It's a great community, and I'm enjoying every moment of it.
Yeah, awesome. And I like to share the story of how I met you, Juan. I met Juan at NACAC, I think it was, and I think it was 2 years ago. And it was after I had presented, I think it was our AICA, maybe our SIG meeting or another session that I had presented at. And Juan came up at the end and he said, "Hey, that was great, great presentation. I want to tell you what I'm doing." And he shared a little bit about what he's going to share today with us of what they were thinking about implementing, about what they had been working on already for several years. And, that they really wanted to take this public. And I think I might have physically even taken a step back and gone, wow, that is amazing and scary and very, very cool. I mean, he was the first person that said, I want to go public with what we're doing and share this with the community. And from there, we've become friends. We've presented together. We've been talking about this, and it's been really fun watching how this all has played out. And I've just been so impressed from that conversation to, what has happened since then in the last year and a half. It's a lot. Let me just share. Let me get the slides up here. I just, to set the stage before Juan jumps into his slides here, I just want to remind the audience where we are today, in terms of this journey of AI in college admission. Very few institutions have explicit instructions for applicants, for prospective students about how to use AI in the review process, but, less than 10%. This is a big challenge for students who are trying to figure out how to use it, trying to figure out how to manage this new technology. So I'm just sharing this number to show that there's a lot of institutions that still don't have policies and guidance that's helping students. And although many universities don't have that guidance, most universities are already using AI somewhere on their in their office, if not as part of the application review process. Very few schools are doing things as cool as Virginia Tech. But, for many years, even before LLMs, were started or came out, we were using it, in different ways, in terms of kind of figuring out who we want to recruit, figuring out what students, creating predictive models. That's a usage of AI that's been around for a very long time. We're now using it in the last few years, very different ways in terms of personalized marketing. Long gone are the days where we just blanket email everybody with the same message. Now we can segment much more. We can send them things that are really of interest to them. A lot of schools are implementing chatbots, where students can talk to somebody 24/7, weekends, late at night. There's somebody there to answer their questions. And these chatbots are not the chatbots that I remember of my younger years. These are actually chatbots that sound much more natural and can really interact in a very personal way with students. We're using it in a lot of different ways already. But today we're going to be focusing on one new use case, and that's in application review. So with the essay portion. So Juan, I'm going to hand hand it over to you here. I am controlling these slides, so we'll work to move it along smoothly for all of you. And I'm going to hand it over so Juan can share a little bit about what they're doing.
Thanks, Emily. Let's dive right into it. Before I get into the actual tool, I did feel it was important to give a little bit of context to our application process. I'm going to start with a key foundation, and that's going to be the next slide on non-cognitive essay questions. So this was something we introduced back in 2018, 2019, during that admission cycle. Previous to that, we did have questions on our application, but they were optional, not required. And so you saw a varying response rate to who actually answered those questions. But they were very general in nature, and they were essentially introduced to try to measure the excitement of the student as far as attending Virginia Tech. What we found at that time, and we had around 30,000 applications, give or take, in 2018, 2019, was that our pool was becoming more homogeneous. And so we got around 30,000 applications from students who really thought they could get in, and their admissions, their academic profile was very, very similar. And so a lot of people, when they hear an applicant pool, they think, oh, it's reflective of my high school. So you've got some really strong students, you got some okay strong students, you got average students, you got below average students, and then the students that are really struggling academically. Not the case. When you look at the average GPA for our applicant pool, it actually is almost identical to the offer GPA as well as the GPA of our incoming class of students who accept our offer of admission. So in other words, very homogeneous. Everyone looks very similar academically to where we were looking for ways to differentiate the pool beyond academics. This also aligned with some institutional strategic goals we had at the time of trying to serve more underserved students as a land grant university, reflect more of the demographics of the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so we went ahead and introduced these non-cognitive essay questions in hopes of hearing the student's story. Now, the key piece of non-cognitive essay questions is that, these aren't just regular questions like our old ones. They're actually based on a body of research led by a professor out of the University of Maryland. His name is William Sedlicek. That just as there are academic factors that predict how a student will do in college, he argued there are personal characteristics and personal attributes the student has and experiences that can also be utilized as predictors of how the student's not only going to do in college, but how they're going to do in life. And so we thought this was a great opportunity to allow students to tell their story, but also have a real good way of evaluating those answers so they're not as subjective. So we have a rubric. We trained at that time around 200 volunteers. These are members of our Virginia Tech community, faculty and staff, etc., to go ahead and be our readers for the essay questions, and rolled it out. I think it went very well. We saw a huge increase in our access numbers. It was clear that we were really moving the needle in the right direction when trying to connect with first generation students, low income students. They were able to tell their story. They were able to tell a little bit about themselves. And all students were able to benefit from that as well, and allowed us to differentiate in the pool a little bit more. So we immediately loved the format that we did, but we were, as you can see on this graph, really challenged with the number of essays that had to be read, because that applicant pool of around 30,000 students quickly grew to this past year around 58,000. And so we knew it was a good system, but we noticed year after year that we were delaying the release date for our decisions to our prospective students who had applied. And so we had a conversation and decided that we can either drop the essays and move towards more quantitative review, or keep the essays and try to figure out a way to accelerate that review. One of the low-hanging fruit ideas that we got from people on our team was essentially we need more readers, right? That's kind of what you think. If you have more volume, the easy thing to do is just to get more readers for the essay section. And so it's not slowing down things for our admissions committee who's making the actual admissions decision. You can see here, I talked about the application growth already going from 30,000 to closer to 58 this past year. That represents, since there's four essays and each essay needs to be read twice by a human reader on our old system, that represents an increase to around 500,000 essay reads. There are some cases if the scoring between the two human readers were greater than 4 points, a third reader was triggered. And each essay can get a score between 0 and 3 for a total score of 0 and 12. This to kind of give you the context of that scoring rubric. And if a third reader is triggered, then those three scores are essentially averaged out. So this translates to about 16,000 hours that were being spent by our volunteers to read through all of these essay prompts. I want to be clear, this is a subsection of the application. I've already kind of alluded to that. But our volunteer readers were reading just the essay questions and the responses. No identifying information. We had a system set up to where they saw the question and the answer for each of the essay prompts they went through. They were trained heavily during the summer, each cycle, and then they would plug in the score, send it into the system, and then the admissions committee, once they had two scores, would go ahead and look at that and incorporate that as part of their admissions decision. So I just want to be clear that this is a subsection of the review process, and the admissions committee obviously is the one that's making the decisions. The next slide here gives you a little bit of an introduction to the tool itself. So as I mentioned, when we're having conversations on what can we do to accelerate the review process and get decisions sooner, one of the initial ideas was try to get more readers. The challenge with that is this is not a fun job, especially if you're not getting paid for it. We got a lot of feedback from our volunteers, especially the ones that were doing a lot of reading, it was very repetitive. I mean, it's the same question and times that by several thousand. Eventually, I don't care who you are, it starts getting a little bit challenging to read all of those and to effectively grade those. But one of our readers was a faculty member from our psychology department. He's a linguist. He has a linguist background, and he essentially said, "You know what? I've got an idea. I've been working more with AI, and I hear your issue with volume. I think we can try to create a tool, an AI tool that can serve as a companion reader for your human readers to help accelerate the process." His name is Dr. Lewis Hickman. Again, he's a faculty member here at Virginia Tech. But this was about 3, 4 years ago. So think about that. Think about what your impression of AI was around that time. Very different than right now. And so since we're a Research One institution, we're always looking for ways to support our faculty. I said, sure, let's engage in this project, thinking that it would only stay on the research side. It would never actually be implemented. We went ahead for that first year, pieced together an initial tool running off one large language model, an LLM. We ran it through the system and it did okay. Overall, our confidence rate was around 60%. It wasn't anything major. Again, at that point, I thought this would just purely stay on the research side. Never thought it would actually get implemented. But we had some good lessons learned from that point. One interesting thing that we tried to do for that first year was essentially try to mirror what a human reader does. So that's really difficult to do even today, nonetheless, several years ago. And so a change we made from that first year to second year wasn't so much to try to mirror that reader and that capability, but instead try to create a tool that would start scanning for patterns. And we switched to that tool where it scans for keywords and all of that. It actually increased the confidence level above 90% almost immediately. And that was year two. We were really pleased to see that improvement, and that started to get my attention that, hey, this might be something we might be able to use eventually. So from that second year to the third year, the research team continued to do work, continued to try to find ways to improve that overall confidence level. And at that point, and this was pretty innovative at the time, but more standard practice now, they moved from relying on one LLM to an ensemble. And essentially, the best way I can describe this, just as you would ask one person to read an essay, if you were to ask three different people, you would get three different perspectives. And so that was what we essentially did by moving to three different LLMs. You're essentially creating different perspectives. But then one of the main reasons we did this was to limit the ability of bias entering the system. So that first year and that second year, um, because of the evidence of bias in some of the results, we started evaluating a de-biasing model and process. And if you ever done any of that, it is really difficult to do. It's essentially like a whack-a-mole. You're looking at certain demographics. So let's say if you're looking at a group of engineers and you're noticing that they're scoring lower from this AI essay reading tool, and you're trying to level the playing field so engineers aren't at a disadvantage. As you try to level their score off, it impacts other subgroups' scores. And so it's like as you try to get the engineers back to where they need to be, all of a sudden all your liberal arts majors are at a disadvantage. And then when you try to level that out, then you notice the business students are going out of whack. And so it was a really difficult exercise. And we found that by moving from this one LLM, which you increase the chances of bias being present, moving to three, the data results were clear and saying no de-biasing was even required at that point, because all the subgroups were being evaluated fairly. And that was a huge, huge relief to us. Because once you start down that process, it really, in my opinion, introduces some risk for the institution, and how they're going to be able not just to defend the use of the AI tool, but there's the following steps to legitimize that tool. So I was really relieved when we moved to this ensemble, and that's actually why a lot of organizations that use an ensemble of LLMs do it to get away from that bias. Now, I know there will be those that say you can never remove bias completely, but this does help mitigate the risk significantly. The fact that we're also training on 7 years of admissions cycles to the LLM also helped quite a bit. Um, for this, that first point kind of summarizes what I was just talking about as far as having a majority vote ensemble. Um, by doing this all within our Virginia Tech resources, we're not dealing with vendors of any kind. The LLMs are licensed, they're on premise, which essentially means we're not training as if you were to look at ChatGPT or some other free LLMs, they're free because you're training them in some ways. You're giving them data, you're making them smarter. The LLMs that we're utilizing do not export anything that we're inserting into it back to the main framework or centralized system. It stays completely on premise on our campus. And from an cybersecurity risk, that helps quite a bit. The fact that our process was already hiding the students' identifying information for our human essay readers was another bonus because we essentially already had a system in place that was mitigating any sort of risk of personal identifying information reaching out. And then this last point was just the 7 cycles of training data. As I mentioned, we had to make this process and this LLM smart enough to read the essays, and the only way you could do that is by inserting the data that we have. When you go to the next slide, it talks about some of the results that we were able to see. Um, Actually, if you want to go to that other screen, I actually really like that because, yep, you have a great visual flow here of how the tool is working. So under the old system, again, we had 2 human readers. Under the new system, we have a human reader, and then we have the AI tool. We wanted to show confidence in this. So as I mentioned earlier, when we had 2 human readers, if there was a score difference of greater than 4 points, a third reader would be triggered. Under the new system, we still have that third reader trigger, but it's been reduced to 2 points. And we did that to ensure that students felt like they were going to get the best result possible. And so by reducing that discrepancy to 2 points, we can ensure the strong quality in the scoring. And that third reader under the new system would be a human reader. So there's lots of safeguards. We still have a human reader. This isn't something we're just plugging into AI and going off that score alone. We have the safeguard of having a current volunteer still be the human reader, AI scores, and if for some reason there's a discrepancy of more than 2 points on that rubric between 0 and 12 for those four questions, a third reader will go ahead and be triggered. And then those three scores will essentially be averaged out. The final score is inserted back into our review process for the admissions committee to take into account and make an admissions decision. I want to be clear that admissions committee is 100% human. All right. So although we're trying to gain efficiencies in the process from the essay reading component, the actual admissions decision is 100% human. We're not using any sort of AI tools for that portion of the review. And that admissions committee member essentially recommends the decision. And then there's one extra layer where an audit is completed, and then all the recommended decisions are essentially finalized. And then those finalized decisions are released to students at our notification dates. I want to go back to that previous slide Emily is showing what are the results that we saw. What we saw was huge results in efficiency. We were able to release decisions much sooner than we have ever done before. We went from the last big public institution in Virginia notifying their students to almost first. There was one institution that beat us by just one day. That was JMU, which is where my kid goes, and she absolutely loves it, so that's okay. But to shave that many weeks out of the process and essentially save the equivalent of about 8,000 human hours was a huge win. The second thing we noticed was there were lower levels of disagreement between the human and AI tool than we saw between two human readers in the previous process. So what that essentially means is we had a lower third a reader triggered in this process running with the human and AI than we had proportionally when we had two humans. We saw a higher third reader rate triggered, even though we have a lower threshold to trigger that third reader. So we've been really pleased with the results. Now, one key foundation that we built all of this on was one, collaboration across the university. The advantage of using all the resources you have on your campus, one is cost. So we were able to work with a faculty member. We were able to plug this in into our supercomputing center. We saw the essay reading times drop from when a human reads, which is an average of 2 minutes, to when the AI tool reads it to 1.8 seconds. That's how we're able to capture those 8,000 hours of efficiency in this cycle and get decisions out several weeks earlier than we have ever been able to in the past. But the other piece was transparency. As Emily kind of shared our initial conversation, I knew that if this was something that was ever going to get implemented, we had to tell the public about that. When I believe that when a student and really that family submits an application to a college and university, there's essentially a trust that their application will be handled with care. I didn't want to violate that trust. I thought it was important that we share with our counseling community, with our stakeholders across campus, and with students and their families that we were going to utilize this. Prior to us doing that, I think there were some whispers that there were some campuses that were essentially evaluating the use of AI, but it was very behind the curtain. And I just didn't agree with that. And so here's an example of one of our press releases talking about just the general updates in our admissions process, but several key components in there talking about the use of AI and being a companion tool for our essay readers. Now, That wasn't enough, though. And I made it clear with our campus leadership that we couldn't just put something on our website. If we were truly going to be transparent, we had to engage and be proactive about that communication. And so one of the first people we reached out to was Forbes and Brendan Bernard, who has a great background in counseling, as well as a really strong background in understanding AI's role in the college admissions process. Did a story on it. It didn't have any opinion. It was very matter of fact. And that was a real strong effort on our side to show our effort in making sure that this information was widely available, not just on our website for those who are reading everything in our press releases, but for the general public. Shortly after that, the AP did a story on it as well. And we've been very responsive to any media who wanted to learn more, ask questions about it. We wanted to be open and transparent. Another way we're being open and transparent as well is making sure that we're sharing this on the academic side. So our research team has submitted some journal articles to various peer-reviewed journal articles, not just in the higher education realm, but on the technology side, explaining some of the work that we've done and putting it out there and making sure it's open for inspection. Now, are we sharing the rubric of our scoring? No, of course not. That wouldn't make sense. But we're being very clear on the mechanics. We're being very clear on our findings and making sure that's out there for the public. I think that our field benefits when we're more open and transparent to students and their families. I think that level of general mistrust towards higher education, I've got major concerns about that. There was a Pew Research poll last year that stated, 7 in 10 Americans think higher ed is headed in the wrong direction. And so I think we, working on the institutional side, have to make a stronger effort to try to rebuild that trust. And a good way to rebuild that trust is being more open and transparent about your application process and the use of AI, and be very open on the results that you're seeing from any sort of use and tools that you might have introduced. So we have tried really hard to try to introduce a best practice and how to do something like this. I'm not trying to argue this is a universal tool for all colleges and universities. We had a really good system in place that it fit very well into, but I recognize it may not be a good fit for other colleges and universities. What
Mhm.
I hope will be utilized as a best practice is the level of transparency that we've shown each step of the way as we've not only developed this tool, but also introduced this tool to the general public.
Thanks, Juan. Thank you for that. That was great, and a lot of great questions are coming in here. And so, yeah, I'd love to be able to engage a little bit with our audience here. You talked a little bit about this, but Marissa had a great question about who was involved in this on your campus. You mentioned that faculty member. You mentioned a little bit who had to be a part of this. Did you put together a task force, or how did you get started and make sure that you had the right people in the room?
Yeah, so it started with the professor, Dr. Lewis Hickman, and we were just really lucky to have someone of that talent. To have a linguist also heavily trained up on AI, I wouldn't say that's a common intersection, but we really benefited in our campus community for having somebody of that talent. He's a fellow for Amazon. He's got great connections in the industry as well, and brings in a good depth when it comes to just machine learning in general. So that was a key component. Once we started engaging with him, we needed to make sure that the admissions team was working with him and our research side at the university. Because remember, there was some ethical questions that with any research project you needed to navigate through. And so we worked with that group. And then when we started getting some momentum that there was a possibility we would maybe one day use this tool, that stakeholder group broadened. And that included representatives from our data analytics team, essentially those who would help institute the tool within our current ERP process. That expanded to other representatives in our enrollment management unit. Uh, it brought in stakeholders from our IT department, It brought in stakeholders from our supercomputer computing center. It brought in some stakeholders from legal for lots of different reasons, from our PR team at the university. Once we started thinking that maybe this was something we were going to roll out, obviously because of that transparency pillar that we really felt strongly about, PR needed to be part of that. We have I call him the AI guru at Virginia Tech, someone who's tasked to kind of lead the university through different aspects of artificial intelligence as that disruption takes place. His name is Dale Pike. He became someone that kind of was involved in the process. And then, of course, senior leadership. And so that was our provost and president. I was really encouraged, and I've got to say, when you look at the culture of Virginia Tech, we're not typically known uh, I guess, I want to be careful in how I say this. We have our appetite for risk is not very high. We're very careful, all right? We want to make sure that we don't end up in a newspaper for the wrong reasons. And so the culture of Virginia Tech has always been very cautious, very conservative in any sort of risk assessment. But when I presented this idea with the larger stakeholder team, senior leadership could not ignore the efficiency gains from being able to get decisions out so much sooner, being able to shave about 8,000 hours from the process. And again, there's no cost savings. That was never a motivation here. It was efficiency in trying to get decisions back sooner because these were all volunteers. And they immediately were really excited about the process. The president of the university, Dr. Tim Sands, was excited. The provost at the time, Dr. Cyril Clark, was really excited to see such results, but also a collaboration among an administrative unit and the research unit on campus. That's exactly what provosts really want happening on any college campus. And so that stakeholder grew quite a bit. And then as we decided to move forward with this, we all kind of worked in unison with PR to make sure that we were doing everything we could to live up to the expectations we were going to set on being open and transparent, and being really responsive to any requests out there.
Mhm. Yeah. I'm wondering if Lewis might want to do some consulting because I think after this webinar, there's a few people that are writing his name down. Because
Yeah, I will tell you, we have responded to lots of different colleges and universities that have been curious about this. We've done Zooms like this. We've even, if I'm in the area traveling, I'll present to their team about what we did. We're being very open about this because if this is something that can help colleges and universities, and they want to mirror any of this, we encourage that because my hope is that students are going to benefit from this beyond Virginia Tech. If we're all able to shave additional hours out of this process and get decisions back sooner to a generation of students that really want things much sooner than what we did when we navigated through that process, we're all going to be more responsive to that needs. And I think that's a good thing. And that will help rebuild some trust in higher education as well.
Mhm. And I want to emphasize here, you didn't remove the human. This became,
Correct.
the human remained in the loop in this process. And so this still is a human, run process, right?
Yes, as I talked about with the admissions committee and the actual admissions decision being made, 100% human. As you look at the disruption taking place in AI today, it's really hard to predict where we're going to be a few years down the road. But there was a really interesting article written by economics professor out of the University of Chicago, Alex Emas, and it's on Substack. It's out there. It's so interesting because his guess is one that resonates with me really well in that you're going to see a period of overabundance, and that's kind of a term being used in AI circles, right? So everything's going to be a lot cheaper to produce, commodities wise, goods and whatnot. And scarcity is going to shift, but that doesn't mean scarcity goes away. And there are going to be disruptions. But what he's essentially predicting is that the relational sector, occupations and experiences based on relationships are going to thrive during this era. And so I think for higher education, a takeaway we can have on that is essentially we need to start investing more in humans and not just be focused on the technology efficiency drive. Because in my opinion, if you're entering AI and your goal is to be motivated by efficiencies and cut costs, that's kind of a race to the bottom. Versus if you're really trying to look at what's emerging in front of us today, I think there's a real opportunity to actually increase the role of the humanist in all of this,
Mhm.
increase the human judgment. Because as more things get automated, the general public, especially students navigating through this process, they're going to get tired of that. It's going to be very similar if that's all colleges are doing. They're going to look for universities and colleges that are going to differentiate themselves out from that process. And
Mhm.
that means ultimately investing in those that can really impact relationships, in my opinion. So that's faculty, that's making sure you're recruiting best faculty, that's putting the priority on faculty, making sure they're getting all the resources that they need to deliver a high quality in-person and great experience for those students. And it also means through an enrollment lens that we're investing in building that trust and also making those connections in the front end.
Mhm. Yeah, and what about your staff, your humans in your office? Was there training that you needed to do in order to get them up to speed on this? And both your counselors who go out and talk to prospective students and talk to college counselors, did you do some training with them on this? And also the training for the readers. Was there anything different that they needed to be aware of in the reading process, or did nothing change there and you just added the AI reader?
Yeah, I'll start with the last one. So with the volunteer readers, they have to get trained every year, even if they're a returning reader. So there's always changes that take place. Takes over the summer, takes a couple of days to do that. No real change in guidance because again, they're just looking through the lens of this is how I'm evaluating each of the individual essays. We of course made it known that there was going to be an essay reading tool, so hopefully they would have less essays to read, which they were very excited to hear. As far as their rubric itself, nothing necessarily changed there. As far as this is a larger campus community and all our different stakeholders, I have found that when you look at the level of acceptance for a change like this, and this is specific to the use of AI, in my opinion, there's a high correlation as far as acceptance tied to literacy of the actual technology. I think this is an age-old example of the less you understand about something, the more you're going to be suspicious of it and you're going to like it less. The more you get to understand a technology, your comfort level increases, and you might not necessarily be 100% on board, but you're kind of more open to seeing what it's able to do. And so we found that not just talking about the tool, but kind of explaining how we were able to develop the tool, all the human safeguards that are in place, brought the level of comfort for a lot of the key stakeholders involved with this. Now, this is with the recognition as well. The tolerance for error from a tool like this is zero. And we knew that coming into this because we had plenty other examples when you're looking at automation today that alluded to that. So you think about cars that are on autopilot or any sort of autonomous driving systems. If they get in a car accident, even today, that still ends up in the news. And completely ignoring how you and I, as drivers, get into car accidents thousands of times each day. It's okay for us to make a mistake to a certain degree. We're more forgiving for each other's mistakes, but we have zero tolerance for a robot or for any sort of AI technology to make a mistake. And so that's where I think making sure the safeguards were there, making sure that we kept an eye throughout the cycle on how the scores were being produced and the quality of the scores. That is just so critically important for the success of any tool.
And your admission counselors, are they talking about this as well? I mean, do they go out when they do a school meeting, meet with students, maybe
Yeah,
not with the students, but the counselors, are they talking about this as well?
yeah, they are, and it's more through the lens, and I think this is really important. When you're introducing any sort of change, one of the key questions your target audience has is, how is this going to impact me? And in some ways, how am I going to benefit from this? And so we married that message of an update of the AI tool with our hope is to get decisions out several weeks earlier this year. And we were able to do that. That is a direct benefit from that student compared to previous years. For this upcoming year, and we were pretty cautious. We actually saw some great signs throughout the cycle. We feel pretty confident that in future years, we'll continue to be able to capture efficiencies on this side of the process and get decisions out sooner and sooner with each passing cycle. And I think that's something that students and families will be excited to hear about.
Have you had any negative pushback from students or families? Any student that got rejected and said, was it the AI, or a parent concerned about that? Have you heard anything?
We haven't. And I think that's really interesting in some ways because we were kind of prepping that once decisions were released, there are people getting good news and there are people getting bad news. But I think those that were asking the questions and understood there was still a human reader component and that the threshold for a third reader kicking in being reduced in half
Mhm.
really built the confidence that we had. And for the actual admissions decision still being handled 100% by humans in the review process, I think also built a lot of confidence.
Mhm, mhm. There's a number of questions that have been coming in regarding kind of the specifics of how the tool works. And I want to bring to your attention, I've put a number of links in the chat for you. The last link that I put there is actually a graphic that I created with the help of AI. And it really goes into a little bit more detail of, like, it's a visual graphic, but exactly of how that works. Let me just share it really quick here. You can also find that at that link. So Juan shared something similar to this in the approach, but this goes in, he talked through a lot of this. But this is something, if you're a visual learner or if you want to take this and talk to somebody else about what you heard today, I feel like this is a resource that could help you, kind of explain that there. So the link for that, as well as some other links, are in the chat, and we'll continue to put some additional links there. There's been so many great questions
Yeah.
coming in here, and
Can I add one thing real fast? I see a few questions hitting on,
great,
and
great,
that's
yeah.
AI detection.
Yes, that was
We are
I was holding on to that one, and I'm glad you brought it up. We were definitely going to talk about it, but yes.
Yeah, I've heard from so many different people that that's part of this process that we're trying to detect AI and the use of AI from students. And I assure everyone we are not. I actually and our team encourages students to use it as a brainstorming tool. We do not encourage them to use it in its entirety to come up with essay prompts for obvious reasons, nor do we think it would help them because our non-cognitive essay or attributes or in essays are focused on their personal experiences and their personal characteristics. And so they're not very long, so this isn't huge writing samples or anything like that. So we really drill that it is in their best interests to go ahead and write each of those on their own. Now, if they want to use it as brainstorming tools, they want to try to use it for reflection, absolutely, we encourage it. Why do we encourage it? Because that's the reality of the situation that we're in. And there's an expectation for the employers of who's hiring our Virginia Tech grads to have fluency in this. So we want students to be engaging in this technology. This isn't a one-sided, we get to use it and you can't. We're trying to guide students to score as high as possible, and that is not to use Chat GPT or anything else that's widely available. It's really for them just to take a moment and reflect. With that said, we are not attempting to detect it. That's not part of any of this. And it's not because it's futile. The rate of advancement in AI is so mind-boggling that anyone who's actually spending time trying to figure out who's using AI, who isn't, whatever you discover is out of date probably within a week. I mean, it is just astounding how quickly AI is moving forward. I shared a story the other day with some of our faculty members. I was on a plane and I sat down, and there was somebody with the largest coffee I've ever seen in the world. And he was just wired up, and we started talking because I love eccentric people, and quickly realized he was in charge of it's an AI startup. It was something I've never heard of, and he was in charge of the development portion of that on his side of the house. Now, realize I get how the greater public is using those free platforms, and that's kind of what we think AI is. No, on the research side, on the development side, they are way ahead. And when I was asking questions and hearing about some of the work they were doing, I asked them, how would you sum up AI in just one word? And he looked at me straight on and said, magic. This person had a background from MIT, and the word that he could use to explain everything that's happening in that research domain was magic. This shocked me. It freaked me out, kind of. And I came back to campus, had a conversation with our AI guru, and I was like, help me understand that. Why was he using the word magic? And he explained on the developmental side, you essentially create a model, you let it run, and then you try to dissect what it does and work backwards to get a better understanding of how it ends up where it is. And we are now at a place where we can't. And that's where the word magic comes from. This technology is going beyond our understanding. And think how new it is still. So we encourage students to engage, even if it's free platforms, because they're going to need this fluency.
Yeah, no, and I'd say a lot of people who have used this technology, extensively would feel that they've had those moments where they felt like it was magic. I mean, this morning I was trying to get the PDF into a web page. I'm not a web designer, and when I can use ChatGPT and say, walk me through this step by step to do this, web designing process, and it takes me 10 minutes to do it. It feels like magic to me too when I'm done. I mean, it's just like, how did I do that, with the help of this machine? A human using this machine to create something it can feel very magical. I do want to bring this back to that first slide I showed about policies around AI and college admission. Very few schools are helping students understand how to use this technology um, ethically. You talked about using it for brainstorming, but how students are supposed to know that, how students, know how to use this ethically, how not to use that. That's AI fluency, and they're not getting a lot of training in that area. And, that is a big concern. It's a big struggle for college counselors. A lot of this work is falling on them when students come in and the rest of their classes, they're being told this is, don't use this, don't touch AI. And then they come into the college counseling office and they say, there's got to be a good way I could use this. How do I do that? It's falling on the backs of counselors. And so I just want to encourage universities, the more that you can do to kind of help prospective students understand what is ethical and what is not ethical is hugely helpful here. With helping the counseling community also understand how to talk to students about this technology. And I really do hope people will take you up, your recommendation, Juan. Like you put yourself out there that you're willing to talk about how you guys did this. I see a lot of people in the chat that I know that they're in the admission office, and I know they're excited watching this and thinking this is something we might be able to do. We should explore this. And so if you're at that place, Juan did just put himself out there willing to
Yeah,
talk to your team and you about how you did that. At the end, I'm going to share an email. I'm sure you can find Juan online too and connect with him that way. But I'll share our email and you can, go through the AICA team and connect with Juan there as well. But so much good stuff, Juan. If there's any questions that you want to grab here as well, feel free. But I'm going to grab one. Oh yeah, this one about did it affect your early decision? Do you have early decision? Was there anything that you had to do in that regards?
no, we got rid of early decision a few years ago for access reasons. So I know we're kind of going the other direction of what a lot of other colleges and universities are doing. But from an access standpoint, we wanted this to have early action, which is non-binding and regular decision. Um, so I guess the underlying question, though, did it impact our yield? Did it impact, the response rate? It's a tough year for everybody, it seems, as now we're past May 1. There's a lot of different waitlist activity. We're in that list where we're activating waitlists. But we're seeing with some key residency groups and some key strategic groups, we're glad we went out as early as we did. Because what it essentially does is it widens the window. The sooner you notify people, you widen the window between that date and May 1 to give a little bit more breathing room for your faculty, your departments and colleges to be able to interact with the students and kind of build that relationship and be accessible for any questions that they might have as they make that final decision.
Mhm. What about performance of these students? I mean, I assume that you're tracking, obviously you're tracking the performance of your admitted
Mhm.
students throughout the years. Are you going to be comparing this group of students, seeing if there's any differences in performance over the next 4 years?
Absolutely. And one key thing we're focusing on right now, we noticed the AI tool was a little bit more generous in grading than humans. Still within the margin of error of acceptance, but it was interesting to kind of see that trend emerge. It's kind of a good thing for the first year because you can tell students it actually helped you more than hurt you in our process. But we want to get a little bit of understanding why was that actually taking place when we didn't see that through any of our training cycles, and that will be something we focus on over the summer.
Yeah.
General students, yeah, we're always tracking and looking back with each graduating class. We're trying to find trends, variables maybe we're not looking at, not just in the review side, but on the predictive analytics side and modeling. Why did people decide to come to Virginia Tech? What attributes were we able to identify in the review process? Are those good attributes that continue to look at? Should we be capturing other variables in this process? And that's always just a process of continuous improvement on our side. We always want to be better with each passing year.
What is the improvement that you have to do? I mean, are you going to tweak this tool next year? Does it stay the same? Do you have to tweak it throughout, the reading cycle, or how much?
Oh yeah, I mean one of the key, and this is almost a law in AI. Whatever you introduce, you have to continue to tweak it because if you don't, it starts losing its effectiveness almost immediately. So yes, each cycle will have to continue to tweak this tool, making sure that we're staying on top of its design and making sure it's still producing the results that it needs to produce. But yeah, that is a key component. This is a lot of times people think once you enter automation, you just let it run and you just check on it every once in a while. No, this still requires a good amount of investment, not necessarily in capital, but in time from our key research group to make sure that we're continuing to keep this at a level where it needs to be at.
Mhm. There's a couple great comments in here, and one quote that Jamie, our guest, added in here. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, and that's from
Oh, there you go.
Clark.
I like that.
I just really like that quote. Thanks for sharing, Jamie. And it looks like we might have a student in the room, and so I just want to share. Irina said, "I don't use it for my course as per my instructor's direction." And and I think you're not alone there. So many students. I think it comes from instructors not knowing how to use it, and also being a little fearful. You briefly talked a little bit about that correlation between, not using a technology and fear of the technology. And I personally think that's very real. I've experienced it in so many settings where, it's really, really scary. I mean, every time I talk about this, usually somebody comes up at the end and says, this is the first time that I, really pushed myself to go into this space and explore it in this way. And I'm feeling much better. I want to go try something that we talked about today. I
Mhm.
want to go see this. This really actually sparked my interest in exploring this further. And, I'd say that's the goal of
Mhm.
AICA is to spark that interest and to get people started and getting people to look at this. Not because we think this is going to solve every problem, but because we believe educators need to be part of this conversation and need to be in the room and not just say, this is scary, I don't understand it, so I'm closing the door and not looking at this or thinking about it. And so when in a classroom, when you have that teacher that's feeling that fear and hasn't looked into it, that's getting passed on to students. And we see that really strong. We see that in our culture right now. I don't know if any of you have seen what happened at Central Florida University, had their commencement speaker get seriously booed when she brought up AI.
Yeah, I heard that. Saw
Yeah,
that.
that she mentioned it being a part of, that this was the next industrial Revolution, and the students did not like that. I mean, she had to stop and they were chanting, we don't, AI, we don't
Yeah.
like AI. And, I think we laugh about it. It is funny, but it really is an indication of what's happening of this technology getting vilified or getting shut down by a lot of educators. And I believe that's really getting spread to students. And, not that there aren't huge concerns and things that, students might be put off by, but I think that they're really not getting a balanced conversation and being able to see where the potentials are in this and how it could actually, be pretty useful and how it will be necessary in their future.
hmm
Yeah.
I want to jump on that last question that essentially asks, what's keeping a student from just throwing in a bunch of keywords that it thinks that the AI tool will respond well to? And remember, we still have that human reader. So if a human reader opens up an essay and it's just a slew of keywords, they're going to score that as zero because it's not actually making any sense. So again, that's where the safeguard is really important. And that's where the balance is really important. People sometimes sound surprised when I recommend do not use AI as an automated tool to just make the whole decision. But it is so critical that if you're truly doing a holistic review process, you need to have the human, us, driving that for it to truly be holistic.
And I do like that I'd like to highlight that word holistic. I think there's a lot of universities out there that are not doing holistic review, calling it holistic review. And
Mhm.
I mean, it's a no-brainer for those schools. Like this really needs to be a part of it. That AI can do the other portions, but this is incredible, Juan, because you are keeping this as a holistic review, keeping the human as, a central part in the decision making, but just bringing this technology in to support the humans, in the mix. We're coming up here on the
I
hour.
know, I hate it.
I know
There's so
this is
many
so fun.
questions.
So many great questions, and it's so fun to talk about this topic. I absolutely love it. But if you are in our audience, if you're doing something cool at your institution with AI and you're ready to talk about it, it's time. It's time to talk about it. Please, AICA can help, bring it to the community. Let's talk about what you're doing. We need one. I've said this so many times. We need more wands in the world.
No, we don't. My wife would hate that. I will say this. I know you're going to share my email. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on X. If you do want to continue this conversation, please reach out. I'm trying to be as accessible as possible so I can help people as they try to understand what we're doing here at Virginia Tech. We're trying to make this process more responsive to student needs and not discourage key stakeholders from getting involved. So if I can help in any way with that, or if you're on the college side and you've got questions on what we're doing, as Emily was alluding to earlier, please connect with me. I'm offering my help. I love talking about this stuff. It's exciting stuff. But more importantly, I'm driven by impact. And if there's a way to increase impact beyond Virginia Tech's applicant pool, I'm happy to help out in any way I can.
And if you want to get rid of early decision, can they also talk to you about that? Because we want
I
more schools
don't think
to
many
do
people are
that.
doing that, but yeah,
Please,
sure.
please. Want to bring a few links to, I put a bunch of links in the chat. I also put Juan's email there and our email there. We have a newsletter that we send out about every other month. You can sign up for it at the link there. Please join our community if you have not yet. That is where you are going to learn about events that are happening. That's where we post lots of different resources. We also have a number of resources on our website, and I included that in the link as well. And then we have another event coming up later this month. Ooh, and I don't have the date there. I think it's on the 28th. Yes, on the 28th of this month, same time on a Thursday. And we're going to be looking at kind of how from search to ask, how AI is really changing the way that students, actually get to your school or get to an institution. And as we all know now, when you use Google, it no longer takes you to web pages, it takes you to an AI summary. And so the whole journey has changed. And come and you can enjoy and learn a little bit more about that. Juan, thank you so much again for doing this. I hope we have many more opportunities to present together. And what I'm really excited about is continuing to see how this evolves, because this is not a project that you have completed and checked off your list. This is almost like a living project, that will continue on and will only get better, and you're going to only learn more. So I expect we'll be bringing you back on maybe, next spring to talk about how the next cycle went and, the learnings from the last year.
I would love that.
Do
And thank
that.
you for having me.
Great. Great, great. And to all our attendees, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope to see you in our community, see you online, and see you at our next event. Take care. Bye-bye.